Welcome to a new episode of the Roofless Dog and Pony Show. My name is Julio Panicello. I am the Dream Alchemist at Roofless Painters, a free-range art school and gallery for nomads and misfits. Each episode features the theme of our next painting collection, so you can learn what we'll be painting and why. In addition to discussing the origin of the concept, and its contemporary context, we explore the possibilities for visual representation on our work, using paintings throughout history as inspiration. We cite stylistic and historical references. In many ways, our episodes are like our paintings, messy, unpredictable, and unvarnished. All episodes can be found as video on Instagram and on our YouTube channel, and also as podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and other popular podcast platforms. So you can listen while you walk, drive, to tune out of this crazy world, or if you want to fall asleep. So you're invited to contact us with any questions or remarks about the presentation, like about this episode, and to contribute your notes to this episode. And so this week we have decided to just move from still life and landscape, which we've done in the past 3 weeks, and move on to portraiture. And we came across a painting by this painting by a contemporary artist. Her name is Virginia Nimarco. I think I'm not sure how her last name is pronounced. Virginia Nimarco. She is a British artist and an activist. She was born in London. She lives and works in London. And she studied art in the Goldsmiths College of London. She graduated with a PhD in fine art, in theory and in practice. This is a painting by her. Her practice combines mostly photographic and curatorial projects. She also works in community development and environmental regeneration initiatives across London. She currently works mainly with food, and she runs a raw food restaurant. Anyhow, so we came across this painting, and the title of this painting is Untitled Number 1, after Gerhard Richter, Betty, 1988. And this painting was done in 2001. And on this painting, she essentially replicates the photorealism of the portrait that Gerhard Richter did of his daughter, and he painted the portrait in 1988. And we were really interested, and we don't know exactly why, based on her background and why this contemporary artist, and based on what she's doing right now, why she was interested in 2001 in creating a replica, or sort of like a recreation of the posture and the technique of the portrait by Gerhard Richter. The point is that when we saw this painting, it reminded us, not only because of the title, but it reminded us of that amazing portrait, the 1988 portrait of Betty. So we found articles we actually found an article in Art Forum that talks about this specific painting, Virginia's painting. And it describes the painting as a replication of the photorealist portrait by German painter, but she substitutes a young African American woman for his daughter, inviting reconsideration of the determinability of an image and the way in which racial differentiation may shift the meaning of an icon otherwise unmodified. So it's sort of like a really complex sentence saying that she essentially substitutes the model, which in the 1988 painting is Jericho Richter's daughter, with the image of an African American woman. It's the same posture, it's the same position. It also is painted with the same exact technique, which is photorealistic, but at the same time, you know that it's from a photo because there are some blurred edges. So there's this idea of painting a photograph and not really being interested in painting a model from life. Anyhow, so we're gonna show now the actual 1988 painting, and this is the painting by Jericho Richter. This is the inspiration of Virginia's recreation that she did in 2001. We would love to find out exactly what was the inspiration and the reason why she did that portrait, her fascination with German Richter. Maybe conceptually there is a connection. There is this also this idea of a lot of contemporary painters who happen to be African American who are interested in not rewriting, but just using Eurocentric approaches to painting, traditional and very classic, and creating a contemporary new narrative with subjects and models that are representational of their existence. So maybe there is a component, a racial component there as well. But beyond that, we thought it would be interesting to talk about this painting, to talk about Virginia's painting, and to do our own version of Betty, making or creating a painting using a photograph of a figure that has this interesting, enigmatic, curious, and confronting anti-portrait posture. And precisely that's going to be the title of the series, Anti-Portrait, of a figure that is it seems like it's going to face us, but instead it's looking back. We don't see the face of the figure. We don't know if that moment, or in that moment, she is either about to look forward, or if it's the moment in which she actually turns back. We found in some articles that the background image, this sort of like a khaki green or this dark desaturated green, is in fact one of the earliest paintings by Jericho Richter himself, which adds another narrative of the fact that the figure is looking back at another painting. It's a painting from a photograph of a figure that's looking back at a painting. So this is this painting. It's not very big. It's part of the permanent collection at the St. Louis Art Museum, and it portrays Betty, Richter's daughter, 10 years before the artist painted it. So the photograph was taken 10 years before Jericho Richter actually painted it. So this has a little bit of a reminiscence of Vermeer in the quality, the photographic quality, or the rendition of the figure. Obviously, the artist does not hide the fact that he is painting this off of a photograph. In fact, there's a whole idea in Jericho Richter's work about using photographs as the subject of his paintings, and he is using a conceptual reasoning for it. He says that photographs are better than reality in capturing details. They're more true to reality than the reality itself. So that's an interesting approach. So this obviously, it's an example in late 20th century in which a painting completely breaks every convention of classical portraiture. Richter is famous for many things, but there's always this passion for almost antagonizing style. So in this case, he's using extremely realistic representation of a figure with a very anti-portrait convention. The composition, it's not what you would expect when you see a painting that it's so photorealistic. You would imagine that the predictable way of approaching this is just looking at the actual facial features, that portraiture is interested in capturing the psychological emotion of the sitter, but he is just breaking convention here and adding a completely different conceptual basis. So her daughter turns away from the camera, and the viewer looks into supposedly, allegedly, one of Richter's monochrome works from the mid-70s. You could argue that this is perhaps a study on the isolation or the disenfranchised stance of a figure, or Richter himself. The portrait, it's a contradiction in itself for what we just said, the opposition between the style of the painting and the way the figure is depicted. So yeah, I think it would be interesting to sort of like do a series of portraits or self-portraits that feel more like anti-portraits. And this idea of looking back, because, you know, some people have used this portrait as a way of identifying a spirit of being in a place in time in which we are looking back, but we are ready to look forward. So I think there's a contemporary connection between where we are right now in 2021, May 2021, in a place where we are still looking back, but we are, if not already, we are ready to look forward, to move forward. So this could be conceptually a good way not only to study or to do figure in a different way, but to represent a specific moment in time in which we are about to kind of like turn our heads and just look ahead. So just like I clipped or highlighted some paragraphs and sentences and quotes from different pieces and articles and online mostly. So yeah, it talks about how Gerhard Richter moved from figuration to abstraction and back to figuration many times. In fact, the year that this was painted, he was already doing abstraction at the same time. An artist's career normally is in complete free fall when the artist changes style and direction, but with Richter that doesn't happen. He defies this logic by simply not acknowledging it or recognizing that it's the case. He essentially tells himself that he's allowed to do everything he wants to do with his style. So I think that's also very interesting, because we all feel at the time that we have to have a niche, we have to find our voice, our visual voice, and once we found it, then we have to stick with it in order to be recognized eventually, when, if we're lucky, when we are 99 years old, and if not, maybe posthumously, who knows, or maybe never. But he completely breaks, and again, this idea of antagonizing or being anti-things, he breaks with tradition in the sense that he doesn't find his own niche. He just goes from figuration to abstraction, and at some point, at the same time. So Richter, this is very interesting as well, because Richter's personal story is very complex, very or biography. It's really interesting. He was born in Dresden, or he lived in Dresden for a long time, East Germany. His family suffered the consequences of political turmoil at the time. I think he's 80 something right now. He essentially went to art school at some point, and he was taught the traditional socialist realism, in which he was told it was his responsibility to educate audiences about the marvels of the state. And then before the Berlin Wall went up, he was able to escape and move to West Germany, and then he was taught a different style of painting. He was fascinated by pop art because it was so different than social realism. And then he coined the term capital realism, in which he ended up doing figuration, but he said that the difference between social realism and capitalist realism was that instead of like doing paintings for an audience, he was painting for his own pleasure. So that was sort of like a little sarcastic way of saying that, or explaining his journey from geographically from East Germany to West Germany, and also stylistically from East Germany to West Germany. Anyhow, so yes, this what else? That's essentially it. We just wanted to explain or just bring this to images. A few quotes about Portraiture and Style. In the mid-60s, Richter was interviewed, and he said, "A portrait can never come closer to the sitter than when it is a very good likeness." So in essence, only by extreme likeness you can really get close to the essence or the soul of the sitter. And for this reason, among others, it is far better to paint a portrait from a photograph. So sometimes we debate when we paint off photographs, and we had like some crazy people approach us and say, well, you're just like painting from a photograph. Well, guess what? One of the most important contemporary artists made this precisely, painting off of a photograph, the whole point of his entire visual language. And so there you go. And at the same time, we just wanted to say a couple of things about her daughter. I think this is her first daughter. I'm not sure. But let me just go back to a couple of things about his style. Yeah, so he essentially explored with this style, he essentially explored how images that appear to capture truth on paintings, they in fact are not able to. So paintings are far less objective and than we assume. So there's this game and play about capturing and reality. And this is I'm not sure if this was his way of intellectualizing his experience, or the fact that he ended up with this visual language realism, and he wanted to come up with some sort of like theory about it. Who knows? I mean, that's something for others to argue about. The point is that we are fascinated by him for many reasons. One of them is because we watched the German movie Never Look Away, which was released a few years ago. It's loosely based on Gerhard Richter's life, especially his life as a child in East Germany before the city was destroyed. There is a very impactful and emotional painting that he did earlier in his career, which depicts Richter's aunt and himself when they were very young. I'm going to show you this painting. Marianne, that was the name of his aunt. His aunt suffered from schizophrenia, and she ended up, it's like a really dark story, she ended up becoming part of a Nazi program to what is the word? Let me just bring the painting. I'm just kind of like even shaking because it's such a crazy story. This is a painting, it just gives me chills, a painting of Jericho Richter as a child, that's him, and it's a family portrait, a family photograph, and that's his aunt. And this was the beginning of the blurred images. Marianne, featured in this painting, she died from starvation because thousands of people that were not considered fit to be parents, to be mothers, they were euthanized? No, yeah, that's not the word. I'm sorry. Yeah, they were the subjects of a surgical procedure that made them infertile forever, and then that wasn't enough. There was a name of that program. I forgot the name, but they went even beyond that, and after they did the procedure, they also starved them to death, and they were thrown in mass graves. Yeah, so this painting was in the news in 2017 because a private collector outside of Germany bought it and took it out of the country, and very important cultural figures and politicians and art lovers and collectors and museum directors were completely outraged that such a significant painting, this one, which meant so much, for not only for Richter's life, but for also the history of Germany. Now it's not in the country. The program was called Action T4, and it was meant to cleanse society of mentally unfit individuals. So Richter's aunt, if you look at if you watch the movie Never Look Away, had a profound influence on his life. She's depicted as taking him to the Renegade show, the show that the Nazis put up to show the paintings that were considered unfit to be shown by crazy artists. Obviously she had a very profound effect on him because he painted this image later in his life. We also learned that Richter had no idea of the history of his own aunt until he was 70 years old, and it was through the investigative work of a journalist that he learned later in his life of the fate of his own aunt. He did not supposedly. Some people argue that he did know something. Supposedly, he did not know anything about his own aunt, only the fact that he was an obscure figure that was hidden by the family, and his own mother, Richter's mother, always told him when he misbehaved or he did something wrong, you don't want to end up like your aunt. And he was always scared about the fate of his aunt. So his father-in-law, in other words, the father of Marianne, the father of his aunt, he was responsible for the fate of his own daughter. I mean, it's just like crazy. So there's a whole story in the movie about that. This is another painting that Jericho Richter did of his aunt. And can you please notice that this painting feels like the same painting that Richter did of his daughter looking away, but on this painting his aunt is looking to us. So in the movie there is a scene that his aunt, before he gets locked up, in the mental hospital, she tells him, never look away because there's beauty in everything you see. We don't know if that was a quote that happened or not, but we want to just kind of like put together the idea that even though Richter has always been very private, when these images were shown for the first time, he never disclosed his family history, to the point that some art collectors and art critics, they thought that these were paintings done by an anonymous artist, because he refused to reveal anything about that family history. If in fact he didn't know anything about his aunt's fate, it's also pretty amazing that at a subconscious level he knew there was something that happened, and which reveals a different layer about this subject. The fact that perhaps when he painted he had no idea. I doubt that personally, but then he did this anyway, and only when he was 7 years old he learned of the truth of the matter. So there's more to this crazy story, and that is the fact that Richter's first wife, her name was Anne, which is a diminutive or a short for Marianne. In other words, his first wife was named exactly the same as his aunt depicted in this image. Before I show you the painting of his wife, I should also say that there is this painting that it's crazy, done by Richter, no smudge edges. On this painting, Richter depicts on the far left, that's his aunt, Richter's aunt. And the guy right here, it's the father of his aunt, the father-in-law. And that's the one responsible for Richter's aunt fate. So this image of this kind of like dorky scene at the beach has a very sinister sort of like a backdrop story, which is pretty amazing. Anyhow, in one interview, Richter reveals that his first wife, he was married 3 times, by the way, his first wife, Anne, who had the same, or has, I don't know if she's alive or not, the same name as Marianne, Richter's aunt, she became pregnant even after Anne's father, who was a gynecologist, apparently did some kind of like procedure on Anne, repeating the same story of Richter's aunt and her father. So there was a point in which Anne unexpectedly, and in the movie, whether that's fiction or not, the idea in the movie is that in fact his first wife wasn't able to produce any kids or to get pregnant. Sorry, that was like really the wrong expression. So in the movie, so you have this clear idea that something happened to Anne and she cannot have kids. And you have to watch the movie because there's a plot twist right there that it's just nuts. The thing is that unexpectedly, Anne gets pregnant, and the person who Anne is pregnant with is Betty, the painting that we're talking about, Looking Away. When Anne was 3 months pregnant, Jericho Richter painted her coming down the stairs. This is a painting featuring Anne, Richter's first wife, being 3 months pregnant. Both knew about that, but they never reveal at the time what was this about. This was supposed to be just like a figure coming down the stairs, and a nude, and done in a very sort of like contemporary modern way, and that was it. But in fact, it's not. It's more than that. So move forward, or fast forward, and we're gonna end this presentation with Betty. This is Richter's daughter. There's this fascination, obviously. I mean, he can talk all he wants about photography and truth and all that stuff. There is a family history here, obviously, in my opinion, that's really profound. For whatever reason, upbringing, repression, not revealing traumatic experiences from his life. There's here, and we're completely conjuring this thoughts of not being completely disclosing the narrative of that connection of parenting, or fathers and mothers and family history. But it's very curious that throughout his life there were examples of subjects in his paintings that had a deep connection with his own biography. And perhaps to finish this, and yeah, I think that would be a good way. This is the 2001 version of Betty that contemporary British artist Virginia Nimarco did in 2001. And I think we will, when we do this tomorrow, please sign up. Link is online. We're going to send an email also. There's a bonus session on Tuesday. This will be part of a collection of paintings that we will feature in our very popular newsletter. They will also be featured in our gallery. The subject of the painting could be you, or could be someone around you. It could be a father, a daughter, a mother, yourself. The idea is to replicate the posture, the same sort of like looking away. No facial features, no nose, no eyes, no expression on the hands. The series title is Anti-Portrait. And one thing that we will do is reach out to Virginia Nimarcos, because we want to have a chance to ask her why she did this in 2001. It would be amazing to hear about this, and why, what part of the conceptual aspect of Gerhard Richter's painting at the time triggered her emotionally to create a painting that replicated exactly the 1988 version. Is it just because it's well painted? Is it just because she loved the painting so much that she wanted to create something that represented her? Is there something about her family history perhaps that she found a deep connection with? Is this a painting that represents something beyond her family history? Is it something that she wants to talk about regarding the struggles of a community or a group? So many questions unanswered. There are so many questions unanswered about Gerhard Richter. The movie is streaming. For whatever reason, it's like $15 to watch it. So I don't know if you want to go there, but we think it's worth every penny because it's a really interesting study, not only on the life in Germany, but also the life of an artist going through that period of time, and what kind of journey he also has parallel to his own personal journey. So it's a very interesting. By the way, Gerhard Richter has never watched this movie, doesn't want to be associated with it. He was happy to hear some reviews that they didn't give a very good opinion of the movie. The movie was nominated for 2 Oscars, Golden Globes. It got an award in the Venice Film Festival. So it's a good movie, and we highly recommend it. Let's do that. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Shaness. Thank you, Rachidivia, sorry, and Hania, and everyone, Denise, Jen, Darlene, and everyone who's still watching. So join us tomorrow for this new painting collection. We hope to create a series of portraits and type portraits inspired by this, and let's continue the conversation throughout the week. Thanks, everyone.